Hi, this is Beck from the Twisting Twine. Welcome to this video on how to make the Simple Twist Headband. The materials that you will need for this project is a J size or 5.75mm crochet hook and a chunky or bulky or 12 ply yarn. I'm using the Paintbox yarn Simply Chunky in Pansy Purple. To start off with, you'll be creating your slipknot, placing your short end of your yarn over that longer strand, creating a loop around your hook, then yarn over and drag your yarn through that created loop and you have your slipknot. Once you've created that slipknot, we're then going to start doing our chain stitches. So we yarn over, drag through that loop that we have around our hook, each one creating a chain stitch. We need to chain a total of 12 stitches to get the desired width for our headband. Remember, when we are doing our chain stitches as the foundation for our project, we don't count the chain that's actually on the hook. So we continue creating our chain stitches until we get to our 12. Might just take the hook off so we can easily count them. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we've got that one that's on our hook, which we don't include. Now we're going to begin our first row of single crochet. We need to insert our hook into the second chain from the hook and do our first single crochet stitch, like so. We then do a single crochet stitch into each chain in the remainder of this row. So placing your hook through that chain, yarn over, drag it through, and then yarn over and dragging it through those 2 loops on your hook each time. So continue with your single crochet stitches for the remainder of this row, and feel free to pause the video if you need to take a little bit extra time, and then restart when we get to the beginning of your second row. Okay, as we finish up that first row, we'll just have a little look so you can see what it should sort of resemble. This is what you should have. We might just count our stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that counts as your 11th stitch at the end there. Now we're going to begin our second row. So at the beginning of our second row, we're going to do 1 single chain stitch, and then we're going to insert our hook into that very first stitch right next to our chain, like so, as our first single crochet for the second row. We then continue making sure that you're getting your hook underneath both of those loops, both parts of that stitch from the previous row, and continuing with single crochet stitch in each of these stitches until we get to the end of our second row. Feel free to pause the video here so that you have plenty of time to get to the end of your second row, and restart when you're ready to continue. Okay, remember when we counted our 11 stitches from our previous row and I showed you that weird looking little stitch at the end? This is where we're trying to put in, a little bit awkwardly on my part here, that 11th stitch for this second row. We need to do our single crochet just as normal, as you can see, but you need to make sure that you're getting your hook through both of those weird little links at the end. From here, each row is exactly the same as the second row that you've just successfully completed. So you need to do your single chain stitch at the beginning, and then placing that first single crochet directly in that first stitch right next to your chain stitch, and then placing a single crochet stitch in each stitch for the remainder of every row. And you rinse and repeat this until you get your headband to the length that you want. Now, when I made it, it measured about 17 inches when it was laying flat complete, or 44 centimeters, depending on how you measure. Feel free to pause and catch up to us when you're ready to make the twist. Okay, so you can now take your hook out, snip your end, leaving yourself about this much, so probably about 10-15 centimeters, and just pull that yarn end through so that that loop is completed. And this is what your headband should be resembling. You've got a thread end on each end of your headband. Our next step is to sew in or weave in one of the ends on our headband. So you can pick whichever one you prefer. You will need a tapestry or a yarn needle. Sorry, I failed to mention that at the beginning of this video, as part of your materials required. So thread your yarn through your needle as awkwardly or unawkwardly, mine's awkwardly, as you can. Now, the purpose of sewing in this end is to make it look nice and neat, but also to protect your project from just unraveling by having a snipped off end that's not secured. So you want to make it sort of as invisible as possible. So I just put mine through like so, and I just do sort of it through a stitch at a time. I don't like to do it through a whole bunch of stitches in one go, because then I can kind of sort of semi-tighten as I go, which just helps to secure it. There's lots of different techniques, and you may find a way that you know really suits you better, and you might do different types of weaving in depending on what kind of crochet stitch you're doing, or how important it is for it to be invisible for your project. In this, it's not a huge deal because a lot of it's going to be covered by that twist. So don't panic if this part feels a little awkward for you. Once you're happy that you've woven it in or sewn it in far enough, then you're just going to snip that end like I've just done. And now we're going to create the twist. Okay, so to create the twist itself, it's actually not that complicated. What you need to do is just fold over one of your headband ends like so, and then you can sandwich the other end in just like this, and then wrap it over the top so that you've got this layered look, and it's kind of folded in on itself. And this is what the bottom end of your headband should sort of look like. That middle part should be laying flat against itself. So the next step then is to thread your needle with that end that you haven't sewn in. Once you have your needle threaded, you can then begin to do your sewing together. So make sure that it's all, buddied up really closely together, and it's sort of slotted in quite nicely, and you're going to get your needle through each layer of this, so that you're just placing it through a stitch in each layer, and so there's the 4 layers all together, and you just pull that fairly firmly, and then you're basically going back the way you've come through the next stitch like this. Again, each time you're threading through your yarn on your tapestry or your yarn needle, that you're getting each of those 4 layers. So take as long as you need to get this part right, because it can be a bit tricky once you've assembled it all to undo it if you haven't got it right. So we just keep going with this sewing in process until we get to the end. Again, just each time making sure you're getting all 4 layers. And then we're going to turn our work, and we're going to go back and just do the same thing to add an extra, layer of security to your headband. Make sure it is really well sewn together. Okay, once we get to our very last stitch, we then need to weave or sew in this end, just like we did with the other end that we did previously in the video, and just sort of knotting that off, and then I'll weave it in. Again, you can do this however you like. Until you're happy that that end is nice and secure and it's not going to unravel as soon as you try your headband on. Okay, once you're happy that you have sewn in that end as securely as possible, snip off the remainder of that little bit of yarn and then turn your headband in the right way to see your finished project. So congratulations, you finished your Simple Twist headband. I like it because it looks kind of complex, but it's really not that hard to make. Thank you for joining me in making the Simple Twist headband. For the full free pattern and other crochet tutorials, head over to the Twisting Twine blog. Happy crocheting!